Welcome to the Eventful Podcast, where real conversations meet big ideas.
This is where the real journey gets shared.
It's honest,
It's inspiring.
and it's always eventful. Kavitha Gadde is the SVP of Global Supply at LoopMe, where she leads the company's global supply-side strategy and publisher partnerships. A veteran of the ad tech industry with deep roots in the gaming and mobile sectors, Kavitha has held leadership positions at companies like Twitter, AppLovin, and Chartboost, and now LoopMe. Over the last 15 plus years, she has tackled the complexities of the global ad tech market while mentoring teams to deliver excellence in fast-paced environments. Originally an East Coaster, she officially dubbed herself a California gal after swapping coasts 14 years ago. She's an avid traveler and is always in search of the world's best non-savory pies.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Eventful Podcast. I'm super excited about this episode because I'm honored to interview not only one of my closest friends, but also someone that I adore from the industry and have looked up to for a very long time. So welcome to the podcast, Gav.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here, ready to jump in.
Amazing. Well, Kavitha, I know I've known you through Meredith for many years now, I guess. And it's been so fun to watch your trajectory. And now I know you're traveling all over the place and you have such an interesting career and background. Maybe you can tell the listeners how you and Meredith know each other, how you guys met, and sort of where your friendship started.
Yeah, like a lot of my friendships, and maybe you'll hear a little bit more about that today. Mare and I met at Twitter. We very specifically worked for the MoPub business unit within Twitter several years ago. So I think I started in 2013. So that's probably the very first time I met Mare, and she was doing events, and I had started on our sales team. So was working with our mobile app developers to help them monetize through our programmatic exchange. And so I think the first time I met Mare, she was so kind and friendly and a new face. I had just moved to San Francisco and new to the city, and we just hit it off instantly. And so just became really good friends over the years and have had the opportunity to work together throughout many different companies. And so that's been good.
I think I was only a few years into my career when we had met. So I know that you've kind of also seen myself working from in-house to starting my own business. So we go way back.
Yes, I definitely have seen that. And I'm super excited for both of you to see what, the two of you have built over the last few years and been a happy and proud supporter of your business as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Kavitha, obviously, we love to have powerful women as guests on our podcast, and you definitely fit that bill. So, if you could just take us through what you're doing now and how you got there and what you're up to presently.
Yeah. So currently I am living in the Oakland Hills. I am working at LoopMe, which I'm the SVP of Global Supply. I've been at LoopMe for the last year, and I came to the company via an acquisition. So at a couple of points in my career, I have had the pleasure of going through acquisitions. So this is not my first rodeo, but I've mostly been focused on building really strong partnerships with clients throughout the years. I started my career back in 2005 in New York City. And so I worked at Google. I was lucky enough to be one of their first interns in the summer of 2005. So I was working in the Times Square office and I was working on search ads, if you can believe that. And we were focused on keyword targeting. And so I was really pumped to do that. And then I sort of fast track through that a little bit and stayed in the digital space. It was super fun and fast paced. I think the fun aspect being like I got to work in a really cool office, free food, fun perks, all that kind of stuff. And that's sort of when I decided I wanted to stay in tech. I, pivoted from search ads to display ads. I worked at Yahoo for many years and I was sort of in the background in roles there. I was in ad ops and account management, but I quickly kind of learned that I wanted to be sort of out front and with the clients. I'm generally an extroverted person. I'm sure Mare and you both know that I like to be social and sort of out and about. And so wanted to take a leading role with clients. So moved quickly into account executive roles and working much closer with clients and sort of being that quarterback in helping them achieve their goals. I did some stints at some startups, but then sort of made a pretty big pivot and moved to San Francisco and then started my career at Twitter and MoPub. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's generally how I have come into the role that I'm in today.
So thank you for that introduction kind of on your career. I'm curious to see what shifts over the past 15 years most shaped your career.
The major shifts, I think, were the roles. I started in sort of technical operations roles, and then I shifted into more sales roles. And those shifts really got to show me that understanding the technical pieces of a sales role was really important to be able to go and sell to clients. Understanding sort of the nuts and bolts of the business was how I was able to connect with my clients, show them that products works and why solutions would work for them. I think shifting from those types of roles throughout your career will really help you grow. So I didn't actually stay in one very specific type of role my whole career. When I got to Twitter, I was learning something completely new. So having been in sort of the web search space, I moved into mobile, which I was totally freaked out about. I was very nervous about the job there, and I took it sort of on a whim. I had just moved to San Francisco. I needed a job. It was like, you know, Silicon Valley, tech companies, get going kind of thing. And I was like, okay, I really loved the team when I interviewed, but I was really, really scared that I was not going to be able to learn mobile fast enough. So that sort of shift really powered the next phase of my career. And now you can kind of think about it because we're going through another shift right now with AI. But
Yeah.
I really think the last sort of 10 years in mobile was really sort of the space to be in. And I'm glad I did that. But I would say those are the kinds of shifts that shaped that.
I remember when I first met you, you told me that you were nervous about changing to mobile. So I do remember that conversation, and seeing you thrive just shows that you obviously picked it up fast and learned, which goes into kind of another question about that. But how do you stay relevant when the rules of the industry change so frequently? I know you were just mentioning AI, but I'm curious just to hear a little bit about that.
I think we're lucky to sort of have podcasts and industry newsletters and all of that. But I think it's all about keeping up, right? So for me, it's the mentors that I've sort of picked up along the way, checking in with people. So a lot of it is the network that I've built, but also the clients that I've created relationships with throughout all these years, staying connected to them, obviously seeing them at conferences and having conversations like this. I think it's important to sort of stay connected and keep up that way. I also think just being curious. It's helped me so much to ask questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions and learning. And I think if you can employ sort of a growth mindset throughout your career, you're always going to sort of keep growing and learning. And I think that's super important too.
It's very good advice for people, including myself, to do that.
Over the years, we've planned more than 1,000 events around the world, which means we spend a lot of time inside incredible hotel properties. From remote ranches to historic estates to urban icons, we've seen firsthand what makes a venue truly work for groups. In each episode of this season, we're highlighting one property that we love or that has seriously impressed us. Our property spotlight today is Brush Creek Ranch in Wyoming. With private ranch land, luxury lodges, and standout culinary experiences, it's tailor-made for executive groups seeking privacy, immersion, and moments that teams will talk about long after the event. So I want to know what skills have mattered most for you across all of these transitions, whether it's been changing companies or the evolution of the industry or acquisitions.
I think the most important skill that I've learned is being open to change and then acting on it. I often see people get sort of stuck when they're so rigid, so used to certain ways, especially if you're like that in your personal life. It can really translate into your professional life too. But I generally like to think of myself as a person that's sort of like go with the flow. And especially in these fast-paced industries, you kind of need to be able to expect that and sort of react. So definitely being adaptable is certainly one big thing that I've learned. I think through acquisitions too, you kind of have to stand out, right? You've now joined another company. You are maybe a small fish in the pond again, in a bigger pond. What are you going to do to stand out? And so I think that is one thing as a woman in this industry too, that I've really had to work on, having my voice heard, being able to share opinions and being confident in myself. Of course, my confidence has grown over the years. I've had imposter syndrome just as sure as everyone else has, right? But I think it's really important that we show up as our best selves every day. And sort of carve our own path. And so I've learned to do that. And then I think just being a really good listener. Don't just react to everything as you hear it. I'm a very reactive person as well. So in my personal life too, I tend to translate that over. So I've really learned to take something in, really listen to it, understand what it means, and then react to it. And especially when you're in situations with clients, you don't want to be super reactive, like you can be defensive or it can come off the wrong way. So I've learned to practice active listening, not only with clients, with teams, my friends. It's really important, I think, to be a better communicator too.
Just knowing you as my friend and seeing you in the workplace, I can see that you're a great listener. And I also am a person that can be reactive. So having to push that aside is not always easy, but
Sure.
something I've had to learn as well. No, I don't always do it, but sometimes.
And what I find so interesting with all of these guests that we have, especially this season, is just how different, obviously, my and Mare's career in our business has been from your career. Or we interviewed a psychiatrist the other day, or
Yeah.
yesterday we interviewed a DJ who also is an entrepreneur. But just how those skills, like you're talking about adaptability, listening, being just open and less reactive, thinking before you act, and trying to take in all the information so you can make an educated decision about what you're going to do next. I find it so interesting how there's a thread of these skills through everybody who we interview is so interesting and successful, and we learn so much from everyone. But I think that's something that Meredith and I have also had to learn, right? Is that you may be right, you may know you're right, but you need to take in all of the information before you're able to create a plan or share a plan. Thinking on your feet is so important. However, you need to just make sure you have a full understanding of the situation, of who you're talking to, of the relationships that will be affected. And I think it's so interesting how that thread goes through all of these different guests, all of these different industries, because it's such an important learned skill no matter what you're doing in your life. And I think it just comes with time and experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I think transferable skills are the best things, right? Because if you change industries, like you said, the three of us, we all do such different things, but these core skills will help you in any industry, in any job, really. So I think learning them early and practicing them early will help you for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into a little bit more about trust and partnership. And I know in your career, you've had a lot of strategic and long-term partnerships with publishers, and partnership is so important in career and in business. And of course, Meredith and myself, we have partners, but also I think we sort of see our clients as partners a lot of the time as well, because you grow that relationship and you grow that trust. I'd love to hear from you what you think makes a strong and lasting partnership in an industry that you're in now that's so driven by revenue and optimization, and how you sort of nurture those relationships along the way.
Building trust is super important, and it's always like this age old question, like how do you do it? And I think it's sort of different for everyone, but probably the foundation to it is transparency and honesty. I have found that the partnerships that I have built over the many years, whether personally or professionally, have really been built on this foundation of transparency and honesty. So I think being able to understand someone else, meet them where they are, hear their challenges, right? And then being able to support them in getting through those challenges. Being in an industry for so long, you see these people at different companies, at different events, at different places. When you're traveling at the airport, on airplanes at 6 a.m., you least expect it, right? And so creating these moments too of when you meet them and touch points, I think also really helps. And showing up. Honestly, when people call me for advice or they just want to check in, responding to a LinkedIn message, I think it's really important to treat others the way that you want to be treated, right? And so maybe someone reached out to me and I haven't talked to them in 10 years, but they saw that I worked at LoopMe and maybe wanted to talk about business.
Mhm.
I think taking the call is always important because it just shows that, you've got that empathy and that you care. Wherever it goes after that, it doesn't really matter. But I think in 10 years, maybe I have to reach out to that person too. Maybe I need something. And I think that's really important. And so I pride myself on the partnerships and relationships I've built because I've been able to do that really well. So I think if you can do that, that's what's sort of made me successful in that area.
It's talking to you about this. It just goes to show no matter what industry you're in, it's relevant because in previous podcasts, Jess and I spoke about how we started our business and people always ask us how we built our clients and over 90% are referrals. And to your point, there's people in the industry that myself or Jess maybe hadn't spoken to in 6 to 10 years and they wrote us a LinkedIn message and some of it comes of something, some doesn't, but many of those people now are our clients and we always take a call no matter what and we never burn a bridge with anyone. So yeah, that skill set is super important.
You just never know who's going to come back
You
around.
never know. Exactly. And that's happened to me before, by the way. And I've always thought to myself, I'm so glad that I wrote them back. I'm so glad I answered that.
When Meredith and I first started our business and we had to pivot to doing virtual stuff, we produced a very small virtual conference before there were even virtual platforms for a company, which there were no virtual conference platforms. So we had to produce everything on Zoom, which nobody had really ever done. So Meredith and I created like this whole plan of how attendees are going to call in and everybody has Zoom backgrounds. And we just kind of made it up as we went and ended up being really successful. But somebody who we worked with on that project, I believe 2020 and
It was, yeah.
pandemic. And we talked to every day. And we actually didn't have that strong relationship with him on that project. We really didn't hear from him after that. And then actually, I just had a call with him last week, 6 years later, because he's at a new company and he wants us to come in and produce an event for him. And it always comes full circle. You just never know what's going to come back around. So it's interesting that you bring that up. I also want to hear about you work in a high pressure space and a high pressure industry. And I think working under pressure from what we've seen is just this sort of muscle that you develop and you grow. And it's something that you either have to get used to and deal with, or some people, of course, just are not cut out for it. But I want to hear about how you keep that trust, that long-term trust with those partners and with the relationships that you have under a lot of pressure, because that's something that we deal with as well. And it can be hard to balance and manage when you need to make a quick decision or when you're sort of under the gun of that pressure. Just being able to communicate with people, to set expectations, but also maintain a good relationship.
It's definitely a balancing act and one that I probably have to do more often than I'd like. I think you have to be really intentional with how you prioritize. There's sort of two ways to think about this. So one is with my clients, right? I don't want them to know what pressure I'm under at work. It's not their job to understand that, right? I'm supposed to be helping them. And so I try to sort of leave my clients out of it in terms of, hey, I'm under the gun. We need to make more money in this quarter. That's not a conversation that I'm having with my clients, right? So I think that sort of preserves value there. What I do with my team internally, though, is without creating panic and causing concern about why we're trying to meet these aggressive revenue targets or whatever it is in a certain time period, I think it's showing them that short-term goals are more of a stepping stone towards the broader company vision, right? Maybe we need to get these few things done pretty quickly in order to achieve the broader goal that's maybe, out in the future. I think that helps teams understand that some of these, short-term things are actually really needed instead of us being so reactive in that moment. So I think being sort of transparent about that and how you position it is really important. But yeah, with my clients, I just sort of leave them out of it because I'm like, hey, you guys don't need to know what I'm going through. However, going back to the point where if this is a long-term client that I've had forever, maybe I've become, more friendly with them over time. Maybe it's like, hey, yeah, I'm sort of under the gun here. Like, do you want to ideate about some stuff? Like, there's always that sort of relationship too. It just sort of depends where you are with them. But I think that's like sort of the balancing act. And so you gotta understand who you're dealing with and then kind of take it from there.
Some of the best advice that I was ever given when I started my business was one of our clients that was a referral, someone that I had worked with in the past. To your point, we have to solve problems for our clients. But one time I got on the Zoom and they're like, how are you doing? And I clearly looked stressed. And I was like, we're just really busy. And they wrote me after and they're like, because I'm your friend, I'm your paying client. And I don't really care that you're busy. It's stuck with me. I just don't even say stuff like that anymore because I shield them. So
Yeah.
just an interesting thing.
With events, obviously, we are in very high pressure situations where it's inevitable that things are not going to go as planned, or you're going to have problems arise on site. And it's a lot of money being spent. There are people's reputations on the line and everything is live. So it takes that pressure up a notch. But I think what I've found over the years is with our clients and partners, and even Meredith and myself with each other and with our team, we're all on the same side, right? I have even seen vendors that we don't work with anymore, quite frankly, because they come from a place of opposition where it's like, no, it's going to be this way and it needs to be this way. And I think it's that sort of partnership and that camaraderie with our clients, with our team, and with our vendors, where it's like, we're all working to get this done. We're all on the same team. We're all on the same side, and we all have the same goal. And that sounds so simple. But when you're in stressful situations and emotions are running high, there's a lot of cortisol. There's a lot of pressure on everybody from different aspects. And of course, we're under pressure, but our clients are under pressure because they've been trusted with this experience, with the planning of this event. They've been trusted with this budget. And I always tell them it's our job to make you look good. You can take the credit for anything that I'm doing, but it's our job to make good decisions for you so that in turn, you look good at the end of the day. I think that really that statement really disarms people, because sometimes when we come in to support an events team that already exists internally, and the events team is like, why are they here?
Right. Yeah.
Like, why are they here to help me do my job? And we always want to come from a place of, we're not against each other. We're here to support you and just to elevate everything that you're already doing and supplement your bandwidth to do that. Because everybody's personality is different. You never really know what you're walking into when you meet a new client or you onboard a new company. And I think over time, people just learn to trust us. And I'm sure that's the same with you as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because I had a boss that once told me when I would talk about like my career growth and what I wanted to do and, where I wanted to go, he would always say to me, to make me redundant, when you're thinking about what you want to do next, whether it's tasks or projects that you want to take on, take stuff away from me, do my job, essentially, make me go away. At first I was like, I'm not trying to take your job. I'm trying to learn from you and help me sort of understand what this means. But what he was really saying to me is, I want you to be able to do the things that I'm doing, because that's what's going to get you to the next step. Right. And so he was sort of disarming me in that moment to say, I'm here to help you. I'm not here to block you. I'm here to help you grow. And so that really resonated with me in terms of how I want to show up to my teams too, even when I get a new team, because you don't always have the pleasure of building a team, right? You inherit people onto your teams. One way that I try to approach new people that have never reported to me before or never worked with me before is to really just, one, listen, of course, but also just be like, hey, like, I'm not here to be a blocker. I'm here to sort of unblock things for you. So where are your biggest challenges and what can I actually help you with, and not take over things for you? So again, something so transferable that, you guys experience and then I do too. So I totally get that.
I love that. I feel like maybe
we should say that.
Yeah. Make it redundant.
It's, even like we're hiring right now and we're getting I actually love doing interviews and the whole interview process, because we get so many questions. We just had a question before recording this where it's like, nobody's ever asked me that before. This exercise of how we communicate what our goals are to someone, how we communicate where they fit into our business. And it really sort of forces us to think critically about strategy and the gaps that we are looking to fill. The people who succeed in our company and also just in event planning in general, it's always that proactiveness of, what can I take off of this person's plate, right? We do that for Meredith, and I do that for our clients. Our team members do it for us, but it's just that constant, how can I be useful and how can I add value? Just always being sort of on that and proactive about it is definitely the most helpful, no matter who you're reporting to. So in talking about honesty and being transparent and also being in stressful situations, but maintaining relationships, partnerships, maybe this is even with your own team that you manage, Kavitha. Can you talk a little bit about how you deliver transparent and honest guidance in those situations, even when it's not the easiest message to give someone? Because I do think that's an art. For sure.
Yeah, it certainly is. No one likes to deliver bad news. So I think the thing that has worked for me is just being honest, talking about what's happened, what's transpired, and what we're going to do to fix it, or what a solution is. What are the next steps? I think any client just wants to know what's going to happen, because I think sort of hiding and not sharing everything up front is sort of the worst way to go, because it'll eventually come out, right? So making sure that you have context, what's next, and then always being prepared, have data to back up if there's data required, And then I think I also like to put myself in the client's position and think about how I would want to hear the news if I was, just in their position. So I think being able to understand it from their perspective will help you deliver a solid response to them.
No, you go.
I love that answer that you just gave, just because it is so important to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. It doesn't matter for us. It doesn't matter if it's a client, if it's a member of our team, or somebody who is part of a vendor team that's loading in who has a question about something that we've never met before in our life. Meredith and I always like to think about how what we deliver to someone is going to make them feel. And I also love what you said about never coming to somebody with a problem unless you have already been working on a solution. Because if somebody's paying you to solve their problems and you come to them and tell them about a problem and you don't have, well, we can solve it this way, or this, I think, is the easiest path to finding a solution for what's going on. So I think that's a really important just skill to have, no matter what job you're in and no matter what industry you're working in.
Well, you kind of touched upon this in your intro and everything, but a huge part of your career, for as long as I've known you, has been leadership and management. So I definitely want to focus a little bit on that. I'm curious to hear how you got into management. What was your first job in management? And then we can kind of go into that a little bit more.
So first of all, being a manager is really hard, no matter what anyone tells you. It's probably the hardest part of my job, I would say. And I spend a lot of time on it because I care. I describe myself as an empathetic leader because I care about my teams so much. And so being a really good manager is really important to me. I first started managing kind of early in my career. I was an account manager and I kind of had a junior account manager that worked alongside me. But I think it was more of a co-working partnership, right? Like we kind of worked on the same book of business, but I was the more senior person. So I was like more of like a mentor as opposed to like an actual manager. But it really started to show me that sort of mentoring part of management is something that I liked and I really enjoyed. I liked sharing how I did things and how things helped me and listening to different challenges that person had. And so it started on a really small scale there. And then I would say it really sort of grew into a full-blown management role when I was at MoPub. And so I think I started managing a team of account managers, and I was really excited to explore more of what that actually was, where I wasn't actually managing accounts myself. I got to really focus on them as a team, but then focus on how effective the team could be. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. And so from then on, I kind of knew that managing and building sort of high performing teams was going to be something that was always going to be important to me and part of my career. So that's the fun and fulfilling part of it. But the hard part is that you sort of take people's careers into your own hands a little bit, right? Like you're like, wow, I'm responsible for helping multiple people grow and learn and feel like they're successful in their careers. And so that can be daunting, but it can also be really exciting. And so that sort of like piece I was talking about, like active listening, being able to understand people, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and then finding roles that make sense to them based on their skills and putting them in situations where they can continue to sort of thrive. That became really exciting too. Sometimes, there are tougher parts of those things where you have to give like critical feedback and really try to steer people in the right direction too. It's sort of been an exciting journey that I continue to learn about because everyone's so different and you meet different people all the time and trying to meet them where they are too is a part of it.
For sure. And with that being said, what have some of your biggest leadership lessons across your career been?
First and foremost, I think you're only as good as the team around you. I have found to be most successful when I have really enjoyed all of the folks around me and also people that are sort of motivated in the same ways that I am, right? We're all striving for the same goal. We all want to grow together. I think that's important. I mentioned this before, but sort of leading with empathy and trust, allowing my teams to know they can trust me, that I can create a safe environment for them, that they can show up as their best selves every day. I think that's super important, something that I try to sort of live every day. The listening piece, and then just sort of that being adaptable. Not every single person on my team is the same. And so being able to understand each of them individually is important too. So I'd say those were probably the biggest things that I've learned.
Sort of on that same thread, obviously you work in a very rapidly moving environment. I really just feel like business in general these days is rapidly moving and evolving
Not
because
even tech anymore, right? Yeah.
of course, like when I tell people we have tech clients, it's like, what does tech actually mean? Like there's so many different verticals, but I
Yeah.
feel like the industry that you're working in is moving so quickly. Our tech clients and the industries that they're in, everything's just moving a mile a minute these days. And I think it has to do with a lot. I think it has to do with AI and people are just trying to keep up, obviously. But everything's just a bit unpredictable all the time. And I'd love to hear sort of how you guide your teams, keep them centered, I guess, not reactive, like you were saying, having the ability of teaching them not to be reactive, even though things are unpredictable. And sometimes you just never really know what you're going to walk into on a typical day.
Very true. I think one, leading by example. So how I show up is super important on a daily basis. It's not just in times of change, right? But I think being calm through change is really important. So providing stability when everything else sort of seems chaotic, having a plan is really important. And then I think sometimes knowing you're not alone is the most helpful thing. So sort of being in the trenches with the team when things are changing, when we have to pivot or we lose a major client, we win a major client, like just being able to balance what that means. I think that has really helped me. The calm piece is hard, right? Again, you may be reactive to something, but I really believe if you can sort of take a step back, really understand what's going on, and then put a plan of action into place, that's usually what helps. And generally speaking, I do that in my personal life. If something's going wrong, I'm like, okay, my first instinct is, how am I going to solve this, right? Problem solving is sort of a skill that I think I've mastered over time because I do it in my personal life. And so then it translates into our professional life. So I think that's how, you get the team sort of rallied around that. They start to feel more comfortable.
I also think there's something interesting there as well with the staying calm. I think Meredith and I do our best to do that with our team, but also with our clients and then the situations that we're in. Because if you're calm, then everybody's going to be calm. If you're not calm, then it's just going to be a palpable sort of energy throughout the entire space, and everybody's going to feed off of that, I think.
Totally.
But something that's been really important for me, and I think something that Meredith and I work to lead by example with our team and also to teach them is if you can compartmentalize your emotions out of the problem solving, obviously in your personal life, it's a bit different. And of course, we always want to be cognizant that people have feelings and have thoughts and things affect people and affect our team and our clients. However, what I've found throughout our career and growing and running this business is if I can separate my emotions out of something, then I can think clearly.
Clearly. Yeah.
If you're emotional about something work related, then it's going to cloud your judgment and it's just going to make everything magnified and feel probably a lot worse than it actually is. And sometimes that takes time. I woke up this morning with a urgent Slack message from a client saying, you need to solve this immediately and just get it done. And when I woke up in the morning, I hadn't even had time to take a breath or have my coffee. I was kind of frantic about it, right?
Yeah.
But the more I sort of thought about it and thought about a solution and let myself process what was going on in a sort of practical way instead of an emotional way, that's the only way that I'm going to find a solution the quickest and be able to deliver that solution to a client without getting worried about the urgency or offended by the way she asked me. Just get it done and kind of don't make it personal. And I think that's the easiest way to get things done quickly. Oh,
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think it's one of those things where it's like we live in a world of instant gratification now. And so, even with clients, you mentioned this urgent Slack message. Early on in my career, we didn't have Slack. So people couldn't, message me like that. It was an email. And it was like, okay, it was okay if I didn't respond like right away, right? This sort of culture of get something right when you need it exists. And so putting some sort of breaks into that, I think is okay, right? Especially if you can be sort of clear-headed, logical, and sort of sensible and then respond, as opposed to like, oh my God, I'm also frantic with you. Like, give me 10 minutes and I'll figure it out. I actually think a client doesn't want to hear that from you. And maybe it's just as simple as being like, hey, client, I heard you.
Yes.
I understand how urgent this is for you. Give me some time, end of day, whatever it is, right? And I think they just want to be heard. People just want to be heard at the end of the day.
Exactly. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier, where she's obviously in her emotions, right? Because her executives are on her about something and it's her event. And she needs to make sure that they're getting what they want. And I have to make sure he's getting what she wants because it's coming from the top down, right? And so I knew that she said that frantically. And what you said is exactly what I replied with, where I was like, this is not a big deal. Leave it with me and we'll solve it. That's it. And I don't know how I'm going to solve it, but I'm going to find a way. Right. And you can rest easy and move on with the rest of your day, knowing that the problem is with me and we're going to take care of it. And so I think that's a good point, actually, in talking about coming to or sharing problems with somebody while you already have a solution. I think you're right that people just want to be heard and they just want to be seen and want their own stress about something to be acknowledged. And even if you just say, relax, I have it, like you can leave it with me and I'll figure it out, even if I don't know exactly what that solution is yet. It's just that trust. I can rely on this person to solve issues as they arise. We spend a lot of time on this show talking about what actually makes events work, how strategy, leadership, and momentum come together in real life. That's exactly why we built Prospect 365, our partnership model for teams producing multiple events each year who want a strategic partner, not just a vendor. We stay close to your events calendar and your marketing goals, giving you consistent expertise, predictable support, and a team that truly feels like an extension of yours. If that sounds like the kind of support that your team has been looking for, you can learn more at prospectevents.com/prospect365. It's interesting to be a woman in this fast-paced world, especially in tech and just fast-evolving space and industry in general. I want to talk a little bit about just candidly what it means to build confidence, authority, and presence in a male-dominated space. You touched upon that earlier, but I'd love to hear more about what has your experience been building your career as a woman in ad tech? You talked a little bit about making your voice heard, especially when you're moving to a new company. And of course, that takes some time, every new place that you move from a role perspective and just a career perspective. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience just being a female in the space that you're in.
So in an often male-dominated space, especially at the more senior levels, right, I found it really hard to have my voice heard or to feel like I could have an opinion or to speak up. And that led to a lot of imposter syndrome early in my career. And if I'm being honest, sometimes now too, right? I have, though, been really lucky to have had really strong female leaders in my orbit throughout my career. So learning from and observing strong leadership from me has really helped me throughout my career. And it's in turn motivated me to also want to pay it forward, right? So I want to be an example for young women that are just starting out and showing them that they can do whatever they want and have a voice in that, right? And feeling that they have the power to do so. So sharing your opinions and ideas in crowded rooms, finding other ways to stand out, talking about the work and the value that you bring to the company, even in times that it feels most unnatural. Most of our male counterparts are already doing this, right? So even when you think it's probably like, oh, this feels uncomfortable for me, trust me, other people are already doing it. Most of the time, people are really engaged with that. They want to know like how you're making the company better or your team better or supporting your clients in a better way. So it's definitely hard. I have had to make myself, feel uncomfortable and get into an uncomfy space with it. But I have just had to know that like the things that I've done are worth talking about. Right. And once you get that first sort of engagement and interaction, you start to build your confidence. You're like, oh, okay, I said something good or something of value. And then from there, it just grows. And I think just putting yourself in those situations and taking yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit is super helpful. And that's what's helped me. The other thing that I've sort of done over time, and I got this advice from some mentors along the way and some good managers, is building my own personal board of directors. So people that are not just mentors, people from my network, but people who can really advocate for me when I'm not there. People that are not necessarily singing my praises, but just like speaking about me in rooms when I'm not present. And I think that that's also really supported my confidence to know that I have people doing that, have people that have my back and sort of have created, these folks that sort of kind of are around me at all times. And that takes time too. But start early in your career and find those people that, believe in you and sort of latch on to them. And that's really helped me too.
That kind of goes into this question, but what advice would you give to women entering leadership or advocating for themselves? I'm just curious to see.
I think just being curious and being humble. So you come into these situations, and I think, Jess, you said this before, but even if you have the right answer, don't let anyone know that yet, right? Like sort of ask questions and optimize for learning. I think people want to be able to talk and tell you things too. I think I've used that as a real carrot of, hey, I'm interested in learning. I want to learn what's going on here, right? And so that's a piece of advice that I think I would give people. And the other piece of advice, and I kind of started doing this a little bit later in my career, but it's also been helpful for me, but I keep what I call like a hype file. It's a Google Doc of all of my achievements over time that I've been really proud of. And it serves multiple purposes. One, it serves as a really good reminder that I can do hard things and that I can be successful at them. The second thing is when I'm within a role at a company so that, I can advocate for myself when I'm asking for a promotion, when I'm asking for a salary increase. These are the things that I've done, and I have the data to back up that I did it, right? Like projects, accolades, client wins, whatever it is, right? I think it's super important to have that, and also just really helpful for your own, your own sake, just to keep it in mind. So those are things that I would give advice on. Start early with that, because I think it's really important to kind of look back and kind of see where you started and like all the achievements you have.
Yep, exactly. The things that you look at as being difficult earlier on, and then you move through it and you look back and you're like, wow, now this is easy.
Look what I did.
Right? That was
Yeah.
such a huge hurdle back then in my career or in that project or last year, whenever it is. And it just makes you really proud to look back upon what you've accomplished and what you've done. And with that, our next question is something that we ask all of our guests. Obviously, this is called the Eventful Podcast. And so we ask every guest to share an eventful moment. It could be a pivotal moment or a memorable moment in your career or personal life that just comes to mind that helped shape you or moved you into where you are now in your life or career.
I was thinking about this, and I think there's actually two moments, but they're kind of intertwined. They center around times that I was most scared to take the next leap or the next chapter. So the two moments were, one, when I first moved to San Francisco 13 years ago, having spent my entire life on the East Coast, grew up there, went to school there, started my first jobs there, everything. And then I moved to San Francisco for this new role in mobile, and I was terrified. But looking back on it, it was the single best decision that I've made in my life, because now I've built my whole life here. My family is here now. I grew my career here, and I don't even consider myself an East Coaster anymore. It's to that point, right? And similarly, in 2015, after moving to SF and sort of settling in here, I also made the decision to move to Singapore to help build out a team over there. And I had not only never been to Singapore, I never thought I would live in Asia. And I was 31, and I was just like, okay, I'm going to go do this, because it was an opportunity that came up. And I was also very scared. I had no friends, no family, nothing. And so I think that was probably the best year and a half that I ever spent traveling, meeting new people, learning new cultures, and growing my career all at the same time. So I think these types of moments when I've been most scared and like freaked out about what to do, they've actually really helped me to know that I can do really tough things, and I'll probably be really successful at them. So take a leap of faith and see what happens. But yeah, I've been really lucky in those moments to have taken advantage and seen the opportunity in them.
I love that. So inspiring. I feel like our listeners will learn a lot and be very motivated and inspired by your stories and what you've shared here.
Yes. Well, it's been such a pleasure having you. And I'm so honored that you agreed to come onto our podcast. Obviously, I mentioned it in the beginning, but you are one of my closest friends, but also an industry vet and someone that I've looked up to. You're definitely on my board of directors. And sometimes I call you for advice with my career and, of course, personal life to just vent. But I think that everyone that's listening is going to be super inspired by this, especially as a woman in leadership. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. This was super fun.
Thanks for listening to the Eventful Podcast. If you loved this episode, follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and catch us on Instagram at the handle @TheEventfulPod. See you next week.